They thought they understood you. They thought they had you pegged, someone predictable, someone pliable, someone who'd bend the moment pressure hit. But what they never saw coming was that your stillness wasn't surrender. It was calibration. And now that you've recalibrated, your silence is louder than their entire strategy. They spent nights plotting in circles of shared delusion, convinced that their proximity to your past granted them access to your future. They mistook old wounds for open doors, believing if they whispered the right memories or mimicked old comforts, they could reel you back in. But they were fishing with broken nets in waters you no longer swim in. Every tactic they used, every carefully curated emotional booby trap, collapsed under the weight of your evolution. They built illusions like stage sets, rehearsed, flashy, empty, forgetting you no longer audition for roles you've already outgrown. The whole thing was a performance tailored for the version of you that no longer exists. And now, they're stuck watching you rise from seats they paid to see you fall. You didn't flinch. You didn't collapse. And that quiet refusal to react in the ways they banked on? That's what's haunting them now. Some snares don't look like danger. They look like opportunities dressed in flattery and half-truths. A tangled net was cast, stitched with promises of purpose, partnership, and potential. Each path, each offer, each smile was calculated to draw you closer to something you'd never be able to escape from once inside. One figure cloaked themselves in the language of awakening, reciting sacred-sounding phrases like a magician rehearsing spells, not to heal, but to copy and conquer. Their voice echoed your inner language so precisely, you could almost believe they'd lived it too. The other approached from a colder angle, polished and persuasive. Numbers, strategy, grand visions of global reach, all weaponized to seduce your mission into dependency. Together, they played roles, light and logic, heart and hustle, all designed to shape your future into something they could siphon from. But your spirit doesn't bend that easily. It saw the distortion underneath the glitter. Not because you're suspicious, but because truth in you vibrates too loud to be fooled. You didn't argue. You didn't fight. You simply stepped away, and that quiet choice rang like thunder through their empire of illusions. When their offer fell flat in your silence, something inside them cracked. They weren't just selling a vision, they were selling the idea that they were the vision. So your refusal didn't just reject a proposal, it disrupted their self-image. The one who cloaked herself in spiritual light unraveled in shadows she couldn't hide. She'd spent so long crafting an identity based on being untouchable, divine, magnetic. Your refusal was a mirror she never wanted to face, one that exposed the manipulation beneath her mystique. Meanwhile, her partner reeled from a different wound, the wound of losing control. Every detail of their pitch had been designed to impress, to overwhelm, to win. They believed they had decoded you like a pattern, but you refused to fit. Their pride couldn't accept that maybe, just maybe, you were being guided by something they couldn't measure, couldn't map, couldn't mimic. And in their confusion, they began to spiral, not because they lost you, but because they realized they never understood you to begin with. And that, to them, is the greatest insult of all. There are people who don't just envy your path, they study it like a blueprint for sabotage. One of them mastered the art of energetic sabotage, not through light but through stealth. They didn't meditate for stillness. They sank into the void, crafting subtle distortions that slithered through the air like static. Not to heal, not to uplift, but to tamper with your clarity, to thin your connection with the force that fuels your purpose. Their partner, just as cunning, operated in different shadows, the kind that moved through handshakes and signatures. They didn't shout, they whispered in the right corridors. Suddenly, plans that felt certain unraveled without a trace. Jobs paused, invitations vanished, momentum dulled. It all appeared circumstantial, random delays, normal life, but the frequency was deliberate. A slow siphon of possibility. The brilliance of their game wasn't in the chaos they caused, it was in how natural they made it look. Their goal was simple, make you doubt the light you live by, make you wonder if the very practices that once centered you were somehow defective. They wanted you disconnected from the pulse of your own knowing, lost in a fog they could control. One of them was especially skilled with sound. Not just words, but tones, rhythms, vibrations laced with influence. They could recite what seemed like support while weaving energetic threads that tangled your intentions. Dual-faced, honey-laced, they bent the air itself to move others like chess pieces. But what they failed to account for was the return current, the invisible recoil. Every covert move sent your way was caught by something larger than logic. And it all came back to them. Magnified. Reversed. Absolute. They never imagined you'd be walking through the wreckage untouched, not because chaos didn't try to reach you, but because it was rerouted before it ever arrived. The first crack in their illusion appeared where they least expected, in their own accounts. The pressure they hoped to impose on you began erupting under their own feet, unraveling long-standing ventures and drying up connections that once flowed effortlessly. While they doubled down on efforts to distort your alignment, the very forces they summoned turned on them. Exhaustion wrapped itself around their days. Joy became unreachable. The rituals they once used to manipulate energy became lifeless performances. They reached for power and found static. They tried to manifest blockages for you, but ended up walking into walls of their own making. The attempts to disrupt your abundance, however covert, spun backward. It wasn't just plans failing, it was their entire structure collapsing in slow, visible waves. One pushed whispers through hidden channels. Another maneuvered through legal and financial networks. But every invisible string they pulled snapped back with weight they couldn't carry. Their names began to circulate, not in reverence, but in warning. Trust they'd cultivated for years evaporated in the face of mounting doubt. Once solid partnerships folded. Agreements vanished. Those who once praised them now reconsidered every past exchange. The stress fractured their alliance from the inside out. Internal cracks that were once hidden behind grins and strategies became too loud to ignore. Professional alliances turned into blame games. Their facade, once polished and persuasive, peeled away to reveal a foundation never built to last. What they constructed through manipulation is now collapsing by truth, and there's no rebuilding from that. What started as observation crossed into obsession, and what came next was nothing short of a slow-motion hijacking of your essence. Not just mimicry, not just admiration disguised as flattery, this was something far more calculated. A person watched you with the precision of someone preparing for a role, except the role was your life. They didn't just echo your tone, they started syncing with your rhythm, carefully curating an entire persona built from the pieces of your presence. This wasn't random. They tracked your movements across platforms, captured your teachings like trophies, dissected your words like scripts. Every nuance, the pauses in your speech, the cadence of your delivery, even your spiritual language, was lifted, reshaped, and rebranded as their own. Not in reverence, not in honor, but in competition. Soon, the transformation bled into the physical. Subtle at first, then obvious. Clothes that mirrored your taste. Expressions that felt eerily familiar. Backgrounds in their videos began to resemble your aesthetic. Hand movements. Eye contact. Word choices. It was a carefully engineered echo, an attempt to rewrite your frequency using fragments of your identity. To those on the outside, it may have looked like a strange coincidence. But to anyone who knew your blueprint, it was undeniable. They weren't just impersonating, they were harvesting, wearing your energy like a borrowed skin. And the deeper they sank into this fabricated version of you, the more obvious it became. They weren't becoming powerful, they were becoming hollow. From the depths of their interference, something extraordinary has begun to crystallize within you. What was meant to erode your confidence has instead revealed layers of awareness you hadn't yet tapped into. Every attempt to disturb your balance only carved out more space for clarity. Their manipulations, once meant to entangle you, became mirrors that exposed who you are, and more importantly, who you're not. Each disruption forged a deeper bond between your inner compass and the source of your power. What once felt murky now stands out in high definition. No fog. No hesitation. Choices are cleaner. People are easier to read. It's not just instinct anymore, it's activated perception. A refined knowing that doesn't waver when charm disguises threat. What they tried to siphon wasn't just your light, it was your architecture, your rhythm, your originality. But here's the truth they refused to face. Essence can't be replicated, only mocked. And every piece of your presence they tried to wear revealed how absent they were from their own. They weren't just copying. They were rewriting their self-image using your blueprint, convinced that borrowing your voice could give them access to your throne. But their mimicry wasn't subtle. It reeked of desperation disguised as innovation. In their minds, your originality wasn't something sacred, it was raw material for their reinvention. Somehow, they believed they were the editors of your soul's work, trimming, polishing, and rebranding your essence to fit a stage they thought you didn't know how to stand on. They didn't just steal, they thought they were doing you a favor by reshaping your brilliance into something more digestible. The arrogance was almost comedic, if it weren't so empty. Meanwhile, the other half of this mimicry machine was working the structural angles. While one copied your tone, the other copied your system. They reverse-engineered your offerings, mirrored your strategies, repackaged your path as if it were a template, not a calling. But what they failed to realize is this: a formula without the spirit that birthed it is just scaffolding. And scaffolding always collapses without a foundation. There are levels of delusion so profound they twist logic into knots, and that's exactly what's unfolding here. A person truly believes they can rewrite the narrative of your existence and legally claim authorship over your essence. It's not just arrogance, it's spiritual amnesia. But what's brewing behind the scenes isn't just a legal rebuttal. It's a cosmic response. When the truth surfaces, and it will, the outcome will be undeniable, clean, and irreversible. A line will be drawn that others will think twice before crossing. And while that plays out, another spectacle has begun. The collapse of an alliance once built on shared obsession. What was once a coordinated front has devolved into a storm of accusations and fractured loyalty. One walked away from the wreckage they helped build, and now dares to return, cloaked in flattery, feigning rescue, rewriting their role like a bad script no one asked for. Their downfall didn't just expose flaws. It highlighted why their connection was doomed from the beginning. Their union was built not on purpose, but on projection. When their shared campaign failed to derail you, the pressure turned inward, and the rot surfaced. What's even more bizarre is the sudden reinvention. The same individual who aimed to bury your light now wants to align with it. They speak in rehearsed gratitude, dangling business plans and emotional validation as bait. Their new approach reeks of manipulation masked as redemption. They're not offering peace, they're rehearsing a performance. Hoping you'll forget. Hoping you'll be too gracious to question. But the attempt is transparent. They're executing the oldest trick in the manipulator's manual. Cause destruction, then arrive in the aftermath dressed as the cure. Only this time, the audience has awakened, and the curtain's already closing. The person emerging from this crucible is barely recognizable. Not because you've changed completely, but because you've returned to the clearest version of yourself. There was a time when uncertainty clouded your direction, when you second-guessed your own signals. That time is over. Every false storm they tried to stir has become a fire that forged precision inside you. You no longer just sense interference. You decode it, separate it, and choose what enters your field with surgical clarity. This level of awareness didn't arrive gently. It came by necessity. What usually takes decades of inner work condensed into moments of deep internal reckoning. And now, What once felt threatening feels irrelevant. The more they throw, the less it lands. The more they scream, the quieter your spirit becomes, until even their loudest chaos meets nothing but stillness. The impact they tried to make never reached you. Not because you weren't targeted, but because your energy became unreachable. You walk where disruption trembles to follow. While their reality unravels thread by thread, yours tightens, strengthens, flourishes. Connections deepen. Opportunities multiply. Your influence grows not by force, but by authenticity too powerful to imitate. Their strategy has backfired in ways they never prepared for. The spotlight they tried to weaponize against you is now illuminating the truth you carry. And in that light, more eyes are turning toward you, not in suspicion, but in awe. Not because of drama, but because of presence. And this is only the prelude. What's coming next will move faster than logic and land heavier than proof. You've reached the part of your journey where the timeline bends in your favor, and nothing can stop it now. Everything has been moving toward a singular tipping point, the moment where deception breaks apart and your truth becomes undeniable. But this chapter isn't just about setting the record straight. It's about elevation that can't be undone. Every delay, every betrayal, every mental game they played has unknowingly been carving a path toward your expansion. Not one blow was wasted. What they thought would crush your spirit ended up reshaping it into something luminous. You didn't just survive. You grew eyes in places you didn't know needed watching. And now, what's on the horizon isn't just correction, it's revelation. When the coming wave of resolution unfolds, it will leave a clear trail. Not just for your protection, but as a beacon for others who carry light to follow. And while all this takes form, another transformation is unfolding in the background: realignment. The weak ties are dissolving. The right ones are arriving. Not drawn by popularity, but by resonance. People whose presence doesn't drain, it amplifies. You're no longer building alone. You're magnetizing others who don't need explanation, because they already recognize what you carry. These aren't surface-level fans. They're spiritual kin. They sense your frequency before they even know your name. They don't fall for the noise or the whispers. Their knowing runs deeper than logic. And what you bring, your voice, your craft, your calling, is finally about to be received in full, not just with applause but with true value. What's even more poetic is how the opposition is exposing itself without your help. They've lost the ability to disguise their desperation. The charm has worn off. The stories are cracked. One has completely flipped their script, pretending to be your solution after being the architect of your chaos. But their rebrand smells of panic. Meanwhile, the one they left behind is being crushed under the very weight they created. Their credibility is evaporating. The losses are multiplying. And no amount of reinvention can stop the return flow of every action they initiated. What was once done in secret is becoming instruction. The very universe they tried to manipulate is now making a public example out of their choices, and your rise will stand as the closing argument. They miscalculated something critical. They assumed your life ran on the same rules as theirs. What they couldn't see is that your existence is backed by something far larger than willpower or strategy. The moment they made you their target, they weren't just crossing a boundary, they were interfering with a divine assignment. And when that happens, the resistance they meet isn't coming from you. It's coming through you. Every disruption they planned became a silent messenger, rerouted and repurposed for your acceleration. Every attempt to cast doubt only made your clarity sharper. Their interference didn't stall your path, it redirected you to higher ground, faster. Without realizing it, they became catalysts. Not because they had power, but because the design around you doesn't waste energy. It transforms it. While they celebrated false wins, a different outcome was being set into motion. One that will not only clear your name, but expose the mechanics of how sacred energy gets misused by those who don't understand it. This is more than personal vindication. This is a signal, a record, a shift in how spiritual boundaries are recognized and protected. But what will truly echo from this is not the loss they face, it's the stillness you carried through the storm. You didn't explode. You didn't collapse. You endured. And that endurance became a living example of what alignment looks like when it refuses to bow to confusion. That stillness became justice before the paperwork ever caught up. Beneath the chaos, past the courtroom threats and theatrical attacks, a deeper story has been unfolding. One that's always been about evolution, not survival. You didn't just hold your ground. You learned to hold your frequency in the middle of madness. When others collapsed into confusion, you leaned into clarity. When they tried to sever your connection, you dug deeper and found power lines rooted in places they couldn't even sense. You started seeing behind the veil, noticing the invisible threads that either anchored or entrapped you. Where once you hesitated, you now choose with precision. You no longer confuse intensity with truth or flattery with alignment. And in that shift, you stopped looking for proof, because you became it. You're not just magnetic. You are disruptive in the best way. You walk into a room and the air changes. You don't adapt to frequencies. Frequencies adapt to you. You repel distortion. You command flow. And what once felt like mysticism is now just your new normal. What lies ahead no longer mirrors the cycles you've known. The future is arriving faster, and it's showing up with better intentions. Invitations that match your worth. Alignments that move without force. Unexpected blessings showing up like confirmation codes. And while others spiral, you'll move with the same quiet force that made you invincible in silence. You'll look back not with resentment, but with awe, because what felt like destruction was actually sacred redirection. The traps taught you agility. The betrayals built your discernment. The loss made room for more precise gain. And now, everything is lining up in perfect order, not just materially, but spiritually, emotionally, cosmically. Those who tried to fracture your name only sharpened its vibration. In attempting to erase you, they amplified you. And the contrast is now too loud to ignore. People can feel the difference. They don't need to be told who's real anymore. They can feel it. And the ones arriving now, they aren't here for performance. They're here because your light mirrors something already alive in them. They recognize you not by your wounds, but by your wisdom. You were never just creating a platform, you were creating a frequency. And now, those who belong to it are showing up without needing directions. The irony. Those who aim to block your harvest are now watching it ripen, without access. Every attempt to diminish you has turned into documentation of your strength. Every distortion is now highlighting your truth in high definition. The divine has been keeping score. And everything they tried to take, your voice, your vision, your presence, is returning, multiplied. This isn't revenge. This is realignment. And it's already happening. Trust what's unfolding. Trust what you've become. Trust that the version of you standing here didn't just endure, it emerged. And what's coming next isn't payback. It's prophecy.